Everyone, this is Keith Stone with the Center for Atlantic Studies, and I'm here again with Greg Nagy and Sarah and Janet and Aileen for Office Hours for version 11 of HeroesX. And today we're discussing the discussion questions written by Greg for hours 18 and 19. First, the hour 18 question is, how is the god Poseidon relevant to the plot of the drama Oedipus at Colonus by Sophocles? There are many possible answers to this question, but I would ask you to choose only one answer. What have folks been saying about this? It's not an obvious connection to me right away.
No, it isn't.
I think of the story of Oedipus.
One of the participants mentioned the first horse.
Yes.
And this place being the place for sacred rock.
Yes.
Yes. And that has a connection to Poseidon. The first horse has a connection to Poseidon. And this sacred place where he's coming is a special place for the hero cult.
Yes. You know, it always amazes me how cooperative as well as competitive Poseidon is with Athena. We all know the myth about how Poseidon and Athena had a contest about who would control Athens in a primary way. But the outcome of that contest, where Athena won, still led to a reconciliation of the two in their functions when it came to thinking of the benefits that come to the city of Athens and the environs of Athens. And I think of that beautiful ode to Colonus. Well, it's not an ode to Colonus, it's an ode about Colonus, where there's one of the most beautiful descriptions of a garden setting, and where there's a mention of the invention of the bit for horses. And you see in that mention of this cultural advance involving the taming of horses, a cooperation of Poseidon and Athena, the rivals. And also, and so often there is a sense of, how did I put it just a moment ago, collaboration as well as competition between these divinities. And so whatever answer the participants want to focus on, I would say in almost every case, there will be a sign of Athena somewhere in that answer. It's really remarkable.
Could I ask you just a little further about that, Greg? One of the participants says they seem to remember another myth from elsewhere about Poseidon trying to rape Athena, but she threw the sperm away to become the city of Athens. Is that a? Well,
it's close, but not quite. The god who was sexually pursuing Athena was Hephaestus. And the Proto-Athenian can be imagined as the child that Athena never had, because in the end, it's not Athena who gets, shall we say, reached by the sperm of Hephaestus, it's Mother Earth itself. But then when we read the research of people like Douglas Frame, it turns out that if you reconstruct Athena a couple of centuries further back, she was not only a virgin goddess, she was also a mother goddess, and she would recycle from virgin to mother, back to virgin, over and over and over again on a seasonal basis. And the most recent version of the myth has her as almost like the, how shall I say, the babysitter of the Proto-Athenian, but not the mother, not directly the mother. And in that case, it's Hephaestus who would be the father, not Poseidon, but in a sense, the participant is on the right track in trying to reconstruct earlier versions of the myth system where Athena is the substitute for Mother Earth. I'll put it that way. So yes, there is an even closer connection between Poseidon and Athena when we think of the earlier past of Athena, where she is a mother goddess herself.
So going back to Poseidon, a couple of points that have come up. One is that Theseus is actually sacrificing to Poseidon. And also someone has pointed out that based on the play Hippolytus, Poseidon is the divine father of Theseus. So
Yes.
there's two connections there, right?
I think that is a very good way to try to address what was a fairly challenging question. I feel challenged by it very much myself. Yes, that Theseus has a human father and a divine father at the same time. And that's the way myth has it, that in certain situations, the emphasis is on the human paternity, and in other situations, there is that added emphasis on divine paternity. So yes, Theseus is definitely the protégé, shall we say, of Poseidon. And so the very fact that it's Theseus, the son of Poseidon, in some aspects of the myth, who finally integrates Oedipus into the land, is again a sign of the relationship between Poseidon and Mother Earth. I want to go to Mother Earth in this case, because if we can not think of Hephaestus for a moment, but think of Poseidon. Poseidon, even by way of his name, means Lord of the Earth. In fact, it's an old vocative, O Lord of the Earth. And there's built into it this very old mythological construct where Poseidon, shall we say, sexually dominates Mother Earth. And that helps us understand how earthquakes are visualized. It's easier for us to visualize tsunamis as caused by Poseidon as god of the sea, but Poseidon is also the god of fresh water, and how fresh water bubbles up from underneath and irrigates the earth. And so Poseidon and Mother Earth are very closely connected to each other. In the classical way of looking at things, Mother Earth is Demeter, Demeter. But again, if we reconstruct earlier phases of the consort of Poseidon, it could be Athena as Mother Goddess. It's a stretch, but it could be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and talking about Poseidon as a father, the participant is also wondering if the place where Oedipus will have a hero cult in Colonus, is it related to the place where the first horse left off?
Yes, and so Poseidon has a very big role in the sacred precinct that is Colonus. If you look at the entire area of Colonus as made sacred by that central garden that dominates the overall district or deme, which is Colonus, and even the landmark, the shining bright tumulus is somehow a landmark for Poseidon as well as for Oedipus. In fact, you could even argue that it's primarily a landmark for Poseidon and whatever prototypical hero is associated with Poseidon before Oedipus ever gets there in terms of the myth as we have it. That prototypical hero is Colonus, and Colonus is described as a hypotes, as a charioteer. So he is the, shall we say, heroic counterpart of the divine Poseidon. Mm. And I don't mean to simplify or oversimplify, in the sense that this sacred place, Colonus, is sacred to so many gods. It's like an extravaganza of gods in sometimes their most archaic forms imaginable. It's a very sacred place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there is a question from one or two participants about the use of the word xenos, because why is the caretaker of the sacred grave? Why is the caretaker named stranger?
With regard to the word xenos, which can be translated as stranger, but it can also be translated as guest or host. What's important here is that the hero Oedipus is, of course, not Athenian. He's from Thebes, and he's coming to an alien territory, and the caretaker of that place is xenos to him, which on one level means a stranger, but on another level means a potential host, just as Oedipus himself is a potential guest. And that's the beauty of the meaning of the word xenos, which is fair play dictates that when you meet a stranger, your first response should be to presume that this stranger can become your guest, and you can become that stranger's host. And I'm sorry for talking about this only in masculine terms, but we'll start with that. And there could be variations if females and not males are involved. But just to stay on the level of male xenoi, strangers to start with, but if there's going to be a relationship, then the stranger will become a host on the one hand and a guest on the other hand, which means then that there will be ties that bind, there will be reciprocity. And in the drama by Sophocles, in the beginning, it's made very clear that we don't know how this relationship is going to work out, whether ultimately Theseus, because he will be the ultimate host, will truly be a host and not just treat this very wretched character, Oedipus, as a stranger who never becomes more than a stranger. But it turns out that he gets refuge, which means that then the ties of reciprocity and potential friendship develop. We have seen the same sort of thing when the Phoenician enters the sacred space of the hero Protesilaos. And first, the Phoenician is simply a stranger, but eventually the keeper of the grounds, the so-called vine dresser, the ampelurgos, treats the stranger as a guest, and therefore he acts as a host. And it's that relationship that brings the communication about heroes to life. And you have something similar here, except in this case, Oedipus himself will be the new cult hero who will, I would almost say, plant himself into this new Mother Earth transplanting himself potentially from his original Mother Earth, which would have been Thebes.
Yes, this is a beautiful answer.
So there's so much going on. I must say that Sophocles has put into this drama, and this is his swan song, this is his last drama as far as we can tell, and everything into it. What's missing here? It's overwhelming. And I think that's why, as I try to second guess why I thought of framing the question as I did, as I look back, I think it was simply because I felt so overwhelmed by how many answers could be given. So I was saying to the participants, pick one and run with it, because there's so many potential answers, and they're all good. They're all potentially good.
I was wondering if one of the epithets of Poseidon's is Earthshaker. The way
Yes.
Oedipus disappears and kind of Poseidon welcomes him.
Yes, yes. Yes, he shakes the earth, he shakes things up, which has in some ways a sexual dimension, but here it's simply that he controls when the earth closes up and when it opens up. And so the mysterious disappearance of Oedipus from human view is again something that cannot happen without the agency of Poseidon. So that's another possible answer that our participants could have given, is that engulfment by Mother Earth is, shall we say, activated by Poseidon, the Lord of the Earth.
Well, let's turn to the next question, the hour 19 question.
Okay.
Here the question is, do you think that the plot of the myth of the Sphinx is relevant to the plot of the drama Oedipus Tyrannus by Sophocles?
I'll go first. One of the participants mentioned that his disability, Oedipus's disability, might make him aware of the riddle more, because he's always thinking about his feet.
It's nice. Yeah. That's beautiful.
This riddle was made for Oedipus, was a comment.
Yeah. In an earlier part of my life where I was looking at poetry attributed to Hesiod, I found traces of an old law. It's an old local law that's native to Asia Minor, where if a man is so poor as to have swollen legs, then he is entitled to expose his children, because it shows that he is practically starving. One of the symptoms of starvation is swollen feet and legs. And so there is a tradition independent of the Oedipus narrative, where the exposing of a child, in other words, abandoning a child to nature and sort of hoping for the best, that kind of drastic act is something that is, at least in some traditions, legally justifiable if you're so hungry and therefore so poor that your legs and feet are swollen. So what I'm trying to do here, what I'm trying to develop here is an argument in support of what this participant is aiming at, that maybe Oedipus's foot problems are related to the problem of the Sphinx, because one of the symptoms of the blight that is caused by the Sphinx is, I believe, atrophy of vegetation and starvation. So in a sense, yeah, Oedipus would understand better than most. And of course, that brings us to the other quote unquote folk etymology of Oedipus. One is he knows the number of feet, and the other is he whose feet are swollen. So this riddling personality, in a sense, embodies both folk etymologies. Well, one of them isn't really folk etymology. Oedipus, in the sense of he whose feet are swollen, is probably the real meaning of the name as a word. So it is a speaking name.
Mm-hmm. What about the name of the Sphinx? Because one of the participants is wondering about the association between the Sphinx and nightmares because of his name, the choker.
The choker. And what I think of immediately is the sensation that is experienced by people who sleep when they wake up short of breath. It's a nightmare. It's one of the symptoms of nightmares. And so, in a sense, the Sphinx as a choker is a very visceral way of thinking of something nightmarish, something that happens in nightmares. I think of that very disturbing film, but beautiful film, Adèle H, where the daughter of Victor Hugo keeps on waking up with the sense of not just choking, but drowning. And this has to do with her sister who did drown in a lake. I shouldn't say in a lake, she did drown. I can't remember the setting. And there's that beautiful poem, isn't there, Hélène, about Elle avait pris ce pli. Victor Hugo reminisces about the girl. And certainly Adèle had survivor's guilt about that drowning. And I always think of the Sphinx when I see visualizations of Adèle H waking up in the middle of the night, and even her name, Adèle H, as in Hugo, but it does suggest some kind of breathing problem. So it's a horrific way of thinking, I think, about one's worst nightmarish thoughts.
So there's also discussion here about the reason that the Sphinx is there in the first place, and how that's all intertwined also with the prophecy about Laius being killed by his son. So could you maybe talk a little bit more about that, Greg?
Yes, I think that the riddle of the Sphinx about 4 feet, and then 2 feet, and then 3 feet is as old as the hills, so to speak. I'm sure that this myth had been around for not just centuries, but millennia. And by the time Sophocles gets to it, it's been worked over in so many ways. I think for Sophocles, what's also special is that the myth is so tied to Thebes, which is, of course, an enemy of Athens in the era of Sophocles, but which is also probably the place where tragedy originated. And I have to be careful when I say originated, but Thebes and in general Boeotia is definitely home to the earlier forms of tragedy. So this has such an anxiety of influence, so to speak, to borrow from the terminology of Harold Bloom. The myth is so old; it's been thought and rethought so many times, And then along comes this genius, Sophocles, who makes it somehow a classic, beyond the prehistory of the myth. So we tend to forget about the prehistory, but it's there. It's certainly there for those who experienced it when this tragedy, the dating of which we don't know precisely, was composed. And I think of the fact that, of course, Athens was, I'm not playing with words, plagued by the plague. And some people try to make a connection too between the plague that eventually devastated Athens and the plague that is one of the primary symptoms of what's wrong with the community of Thebes at the beginning of the Oedipus Tyrannus. So many things.
And one of the participants is really picking up on how everybody in the audience would have been so familiar with this and would have known that already Oedipus has murdered his father and married his mother, and yet nobody on stage is aware of this at this point, except maybe Tiresias has got a bit of a clue, I think.
It's one of those wonders that this very intelligent, super intelligent person can't figure out something so basic that 20,000, 30,000 people in Athenian State Theater already know. So it's such a meditation on how we all have blind spots, and the bigger we are, the bigger our blind spots can be. It's
how apt to say a blind spot, given
it's horrific.
what happens.
Yes. It's really horrific.
Well, is there anything else we should add? It's about time to wrap things up.
A million things. This is maybe one of those moments in our reading together where we're most aware how much this work of art is bigger than all of us. It's just so big, and how can we cope with it? It takes a lot of humility, and I think a readiness to re-engage over and over and over again. It's inexhaustible. So yes, we're going to stop, but the story doesn't stop. It just keeps going.
Yes.
All right. Well, thanks for joining me again, and see you all next time for Euripides.
And thanks to the participants for, I think, very probing and engaged responses to difficult questions about very difficult things to think about.